The night was draped in the familiar calm of a Seattle Saturday, the kind that lulled you into a false sense of security. I glanced over at David, my husband, sprawled on the sofa, his gentle snores filling the silence of our living room. The flickering light from the television cast a soft glow, and for a moment, I felt the weight of contentment settle over me. But the peace shattered with the sudden ring of the doorbell. I frowned, glancing at the clock. Who could it be at this hour? As I opened the door, my heart raced when I saw Eric standing there, my next-door neighbor. His presence was unexpected, yet it sent a thrill through me that I couldn't quite place. "Hey, I was just in the area," Eric said, his voice low and inviting. "Thought I'd drop by." "Sure, come in," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. As he stepped inside, our eyes met, and a spark ignited between us, vibrant and undeniable. I could feel the air thicken, the tension palpable as he moved closer. "Nice place you have here," Eric commented, his gaze sweeping over our home. But I noticed his attention linger on me, and I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "Thanks," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. David usually picks up the place, but he's asleep. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Eric said, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. "No, not at all," I replied, though a part of me wondered just how much I was willing to let this moment unfold. I remember the first time Eric moved in next door. It was one of those sunny Seattle days, the kind where the sky seemed impossibly blue. I was in my garden, tending to my flowers, when I first saw him. He was tall, with dark hair that fell just above his eyes, and a smile that lit up his face. I felt a flutter in my stomach, something I hadn't felt in a long time. But I pushed it away. After all, I was married to David. As weeks turned into months, Eric and I developed a friendship. It started simply, exchanging pleasantries over the fence and sharing the occasional coffee. I enjoyed our conversations. They felt easy and natural. There was an unspoken bond that grew between us, filled with laughter and shared moments. I would find myself stealing glances at him when he wasn't looking, and his gentle teasing always left me blushing. I can still remember the laughter we shared during those long summer evenings. We'd sit outside, talking about everything and nothing, and I'd notice how his eyes sparkled when he spoke about his passions. I'd lean in closer, drawn to him, but always reminded of my life with David, the man I had chosen to share my life with. Yet, deep down, there was a part of me that felt alive around Eric, a spark that I had buried under layers of routine and responsibility. There were moments, too, that felt charged with an undeniable tension. I recall one afternoon when we were watching a game together. I had brought over some snacks, and as I handed him a bowl of popcorn, our fingers brushed against each other. A jolt of electricity shot through me, and I quickly pulled my hand back, my heart racing. Eric's gaze lingered on me for just a second longer than usual, and I could see a flicker of something in his eyes, a question, perhaps, or a challenge. But the moment passed, and we returned to our playful banter, both pretending that nothing had happened. I often reflected on my life with David. He was a good man, devoted and caring, and I loved him in my own way. But it was easy to forget the passion that had once ignited between us. Our life had settled into a comfortable routine, filled with obligations and responsibilities. I wondered if David ever felt the same way I did, the stirring of something deeper that was just out of reach. As the years went by, my friendship with Eric continued to deepen. We shared secrets, dreams, and fears, and there was a connection that seemed to transcend the boundaries of friendship. I often caught myself daydreaming about what could have been if things had been different, but I would quickly shake off those thoughts, reminding myself of the life I had chosen. Yet, as the nights grew longer and the days turned colder, I found myself craving something more, I could no longer ignore the attraction that lay just beneath the surface. It was as if the universe was conspiring to bring us closer together, testing my resolve. And every time I saw Eric, my heart would skip a beat. I felt torn between my loyalty to David and the undeniable pull towards the man next door. I sometimes wondered if Eric felt the same way. Did he ever think about crossing that line? I would catch him looking at me, those intense eyes filled with a mixture of longing and restraint. It was maddening, this dance we were doing, and I often found myself wishing for a moment of clarity, a moment when we could just be honest about what we both felt. Those thoughts lingered in the back of my mind, haunting me during quiet moments. I could feel the tension build, an unspoken promise hanging in the air. I would dismiss it, telling myself it was just a fantasy, a figment of my imagination. But deep down, I knew. The attraction was real, and it was only a matter of time before something changed. I remember one evening, sitting on my porch as the sun began to set. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over everything. I could hear laughter coming from Eric's yard, and I glanced over to see him playing with his dog. There was something so carefree about him, so full of life. I sighed, feeling a sense of longing wash over me. "Hey there, neighbor," Eric called out, his voice cheerful and inviting. I smiled back, trying to ignore the flutter in my chest. "Hi, Eric. How's it going?" I replied, forcing a casual tone. "Just enjoying the last bit of sunshine before the rain hits. Want to join me?" He motioned for me to come over. For a moment, I hesitated. I glanced back at my house, where David was likely engrossed in his work. But the temptation was too great. I stood up and walked over, my heart racing at the thought of being so close to him. As we sat together, the conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and shared stories. I could feel the chemistry between us building, thickening the air around us. I looked into Eric's eyes, and for a brief moment, I forgot everything else. The responsibilities, the guilt, the life I had built. All I could see was him, and all I could feel was the heat of his presence. And just like that, the past faded away, leaving only the two of us in that moment. The evening was relaxed, the kind of Saturday night where the world outside felt distant. I curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over my legs, and glanced at David. He was asleep, his face relaxed and peaceful. I smiled at the sight. He looked so content, so safe. But there was an unsettling hum in the air, something I couldn't quite place. Then the doorbell rang. I startled, the sound slicing through the quiet. My heart raced a little as I got up, brushing my hair back nervously. It was late for visitors, but I opened the door anyway, and there stood Eric, my next-door neighbor. His messy hair and casual t-shirt struck a chord in me, igniting memories I thought I had buried. "Hey," he said, his voice warm and inviting, like a favorite song. "Eric, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my surprise in check. "I was just thinking about grabbing a drink and realized I could use some company. Mind if I join you?" He grinned, and I felt a flutter in my stomach at the sight of that smile. "Sure, come in," I replied, stepping aside to let him in. The moment he crossed the threshold, I felt an electric charge in the air, something simmering just beneath the surface. We settled into the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light around us. I poured us some wine, trying to keep the atmosphere relaxed, but the tension was palpable. Eric's presence was intoxicating, and I could hardly focus on the conversation. "So, how's it going?" I asked, attempting to steer the chat towards something light. "Not too bad. Just the usual work grind. But I've been thinking." He trailed off, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart skip. "Thinking about what?" I encouraged, leaning slightly forward. "About how we've never really caught up, you know? It's been ages since we just talked, he said, his eyes lingering on me. That gaze sent a thrill through me, awakening something I had long suppressed. Yeah, it has. Life gets in the way, I replied, feeling the weight of those words. The air felt thicker, and I could sense the unspoken tension growing between us. He reached out, his fingers brushing against my arm. It was a simple touch, but it felt like a bolt of lightning. My breath hitched, and I instinctively pulled back. Sorry, I didn't mean to, he started, but I could see the mischief in his eyes. No, it's fine, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. It's just surprising. Surprising can be good, he said, leaning in closer. Sometimes you have to break the routine. I could feel the heat radiating from him, and suddenly, the space between us felt impossibly small. I could hear David's soft snoring from the other room, a stark reminder of where my loyalties lay. Yet the urge to explore this connection with Eric was overwhelming. Do you want another drink? I asked, needing a distraction, but I already knew the answer. Sure, why not? He replied, his eyes gleaming with mischief. I got up to pour another glass, my heart racing at the thought of what was happening. As I returned, something shifted in the atmosphere. The casual banter faded, replaced by a charged silence. Do you ever think about us? Eric asked, his voice low and serious. Us? I echoed, my mind racing. You know, this strange friendship we have. It feels different now, he said, his eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my insides twist. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. I guess I have thought about it, I admitted, my heart pounding. But it's complicated. Complicated doesn't mean impossible. Sometimes you just have to take a chance, he replied, his gaze unwavering. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken desires. The moment stretched between us, and I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I knew I should pull away, but instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. Maybe we should just see where this goes, he suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. I could feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me. David was just in the next room, completely unaware of the storm brewing in the living room. I took a deep breath, the thrill of the moment coursing through my veins. One more drink, I said impulsively, breaking through the barriers I had built around myself. Eric smiled, that devil-may-care smile that made my heart race. Now we're talking, he said, and as he reached for my glass, his fingers grazed mine, sending a shiver down my spine. In that moment, I felt the walls I had carefully constructed start to crumble. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating, and I couldn't help but wonder where this path might lead. The tension in the room was thick, wrapping around us like a fog that refused to lift. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. Eric's eyes were fixed on me, intense and searching, as if he was trying to read my thoughts. I glanced towards the other end of the living room, where David lay on the sofa, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. Are you sure we should be doing this? I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. I hated that I sounded so unsure, but the reality of my husband being just a few steps away was suffocating. Eric stepped closer, his presence radiating warmth that pulled me in against my better judgment. It's just a kiss, he said softly, his words laced with an urgency that made my heart race. Just one kiss. Just one kiss. How could something so simple feel like it was about to change everything? My mind raced back to the years of friendship, the laughter we shared, the way our shoulders would brush against each other, igniting sparks I had tried so hard to ignore. I had brushed those moments off, convincing myself that we were just friends. But now, Standing here with him so close, I realized how wrong I had been. I hesitated, torn between the life I had built with David and this electric connection with Eric. "I don't want to hurt him," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "He doesn't need to know," Eric urged, his gaze unwavering. "This is just between us, just for tonight." The logic of his words was enticing, but the guilt twisted in my stomach like a knife. But there was something about the way he looked at me, something that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. "What if he wakes up?" I asked, searching for a reason to step back, to pull away from this dangerous edge we were teetering on. "Then we'll stop," Eric said, his voice filled with a promise that was both thrilling and terrifying. "But right now, all I can think about is how much I want to kiss you." Before I could respond, he moved closer, the heat of his body radiating towards me. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the conflict within me. I could see the desire in his eyes, a hunger that mirrored my own. And in that moment, the world outside faded away, leaving just the two of us suspended in time. I took a breath, the air thick with anticipation. "Okay," I whispered, the word slipping past my lips before I could pull it back. It was a small word, but it felt monumental. I was crossing a line I never thought I would, and the thrill of it sent shivers down my spine. Eric closed the distance between us, his hand gently cupping my cheek. I could feel the warmth of his skin against mine, and I leaned into his touch, surrendering to the moment. Time seemed to slow as he leaned in, his lips brushing against mine with a softness that sent sparks flying through my veins. It was a simple kiss, but it felt like the world had shifted beneath us. The weight of my choices, the guilt, the fear, they all melted away in that instant. I kissed him back, feeling the rush of emotions flood over me. It was everything I had been denying myself for so long, a release of pent-up desire that had been building between us. As we pulled apart, breathless, the reality of what I had just done crashed over me like a wave. I quickly glanced towards the sofa, half expecting to see David stirring, but he remained in his peaceful slumber. My heart raced, a mix of exhilaration and panic coursing through me. "What have we done?" I murmured, my heart pounding in my chest. Eric's eyes sparkled with mischief, a breathless smile on his lips. "We've just started something new," he replied, his voice low and enticing. "And it feels damn good, doesn't it?" I wanted to argue, to remind him of the lines we had crossed. But deep down, I knew he was right. The thrill of the forbidden was intoxicating, and I couldn't deny the rush that came with it. But the reality of my life, of David, loomed in the background, a haunting reminder of the choices I had made. As the night wore on, the tension between us only grew, a magnetic pull that was impossible to resist. Each glance, each touch, felt charged with unspoken promises. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, my heart torn between loyalty and desire. With every passing moment, I felt myself slipping further away from the life I had known, and the thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. What would happen if David found out? But as I looked into Eric's eyes, I couldn't help but wonder if I even wanted to stop. I'm not sure how it happened. One moment, I was in my quiet home, nestled in the comfort of my routine, and the next, I was standing on the precipice of something I never thought I would consider. The night had started like any other. A soft rain fell outside, the kind that often lulls you into a sense of peace. David, my husband, was sprawled across the couch, his breathing deep and steady, as he drifted into a peaceful sleep. I looked at him, his face relaxed, and I felt a pang of guilt mixed with affection. He was everything I had ever wanted, kind, funny, and devoted. But then the doorbell rang, shattering the calm. I glanced at the clock. It was late for visitors. Curiosity tugged at me as I made my way to the door, opening it to find Eric, my neighbor, standing there. His hair was slightly damp from the rain, and even in the dim light, I could see the playful glint in his eyes. "Hey, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, a hint of mischief in his tone. "No, not at all," I replied, my voice a little shaky. "David is just—" I gestured back towards the living room, where my husband lay oblivious. Eric stepped inside, and an electric tension filled the air between us. We exchanged awkward smiles, the kind you share with someone who knows you too well, yet not at all. As we moved to the living room, I could feel the atmosphere shift. I poured Eric a drink, our hands brushing slightly as we passed the glass between us. "It's nice to have some company tonight," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Eric chuckled softly. "I thought I'd come over and share some of that delicious pie I saw you making earlier." We fell into conversation, the kind that flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and light teasing. But soon, the mood began to change. The laughter faded, and our words became more intimate, charged with an unspoken understanding. I could feel the heat radiating off him, and when his fingers brushed against my arm, it felt like a spark, igniting something I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked suddenly, his eyes locking onto mine. I could see the weight of his question hanging between us. "You mean back when we were just kids?" I replied, trying to sound casual. But the truth was, I was thinking about everything we had shared since he moved in next door. How our friendship had grown, the shared secrets, the stolen glances. "Yeah, those days," he said, his voice low. "Things were simpler then." I felt my heart race as he moved closer. "What if I told you I still think about those days? About us?" His words hung in the air, heavy with implications. My mind raced, caught between the thrill of possibility and the reality of my life. I hesitated, my thoughts drifting to David, who lay unaware just a few feet away. But the magnetic pull between Eric and me was undeniable. Before I knew it, he leaned forward, his lips brushing against mine in a tentative kiss. It was soft at first, but it quickly deepened, igniting a fire that had long been smoldering beneath the surface. My heart raced, and for a moment, I was lost in the sensation, the taste of something forbidden. It was a kiss that shattered everything I thought I knew about myself. I pulled away, breathless, my mind spinning. "Eric, we can't. David is—" "I know," he interrupted softly, his eyes searching mine. "But it feels so right, doesn't it?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to pull away and reclaim my rationality. But the truth was that I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The adrenaline coursed through my veins, mixing with fear and exhilaration. "What if we get caught?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Then we'll deal with it. Together," he said, his voice steady. The words sent a thrill down my spine. I looked at him, and in that moment, I made a choice. I kissed him again, deeper this time, surrendering to the desire that had been building between us for so long. Everything else faded away, the fear, the guilt, the reality of my life with David. As the night wore on, we moved to my bedroom, the thrill of being hidden away pushing us further into this reckless abandon. The whispers and laughter felt like a dream as we explored the depths of our chemistry. I was aware of every touch, every kiss, as if they were a revelation. I finally gave in to the passion that had simmered for years, feeling Eric's body against mine, and the world outside ceased to exist. In those moments, I was free. The boundaries I had built around my life crumbled, and I was left with just the rawness of desire. I couldn't think about the consequences. I didn't want to. All I could focus on was the heat between us, The way he made me feel alive and wanted in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. As I surrendered to this new reality, a part of me whispered that it was wrong, that I was betraying David in the most profound way. But in that moment, all I could feel was the rush of excitement and the intoxicating thrill of being desired. The fear of discovery was there, lurking in the back of my mind, but it only heightened the experience, making everything feel more intense, more alive. I chose to ignore it, to embrace this moment, knowing full well that it would change everything. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, heart racing, pulse pounding in my ears. The room is dimly lit, shadows dancing on the walls, but all I can focus on is Eric's gaze. It feels like he can see straight through me, past the layers of guilt and confusion that have been building since that fateful night. I can still hear David's soft snoring from the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within me. "Are you okay?" Eric asks, his voice low and filled with concern. He reaches out, brushing his fingers against my arm, sending a jolt of electricity through me. It's a simple touch, yet it feels like a promise of everything that has unfolded between us. I hesitate, torn between the exhilaration of being with him and the crushing weight of my conscience. "I shouldn't be here," I whisper, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. But deep down, I feel a thrill at the danger of it all. The excitement mingles with a pang of guilt, a constant reminder of David, the man I've shared my life with. Eric's eyes soften, and he steps closer. "You wanted this. I wanted this. Just let it be for a moment. Forget about everything else." His words wrap around me like a warm blanket, comforting yet igniting a fire within. I think back to the moments with David, the laughter we shared, the quiet evenings spent wrapped in each other's arms. I remember how he used to look at me, with a love so deep and genuine. But those memories are now shadowed by the thrill of Eric's presence. The way he makes me feel alive, like I could burst into flames and dance among the stars. I do want this, I admit, my voice barely above a whisper. But what about David? What if he finds out? The thought sends shivers down my spine. Eric takes a step closer, his breath warm against my skin. "We won't let that happen. Just focus on us. Right now." His fingers slide to my waist, pulling me closer. I can feel his heart beating in sync with mine, a wild rhythm that drowns out every rational thought. "But this isn't just a fling, Eric. It's complicated," I say, trying to cling to some sense of reason. Yet, every word feels like a futile attempt to push him away. He leans in, capturing my lips in a fierce kiss that ignites every nerve in my body. It's a kiss filled with urgency, desire, and a hint of desperation. I melt against him, surrendering to the overwhelming passion that has been simmering for so long. It feels wrong, and yet so incredibly right. As we pull apart, breathless and wide-eyed, the reality of what we're doing hits me like a cold wave. "We can't keep doing this," I say, trying to steady myself. "What if someone sees us?" Eric's expression is fierce, determined. "Let them see. Let it burn. What we have is real, and you know it. Don't deny it." His words pierce through my doubts, igniting a rebellious spark within me. I look into his eyes, and for a moment, the world outside fades away. I think of David again, the sweet moments we've shared. But the weight of his love feels heavy, almost suffocating, compared to the exhilarating thrill of being here with Eric. I can't deny the truth that's been lurking in the shadows of my heart. "Okay," I finally say, my voice trembling with both fear and excitement. "Let's just see where this goes." The decision feels monumental, a leap off a cliff into the unknown. Eric smiles, that wicked, charming smile that makes my heart race. "Trust me, you won't regret it." He pulls me in for another kiss, and this time, I lose myself completely. The guilt, the fear, All of it melts away as I succumb to the moment. But as the kiss deepens, a small voice in the back of my mind whispers a warning. This is just the beginning. The thrill of the chase can only lead to one thing: a reckoning that will change everything. For now, though, I silence that voice, choosing instead to embrace the chaos of desire and the intoxicating allure of Eric. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, heart racing as I scroll through my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. The screen lights up with a message from Eric. Just seeing his name sends a rush of adrenaline through me. "Can we talk?" It reads. A knot forms in my stomach, a mix of excitement and fear. After that night, everything has changed, and yet, nothing feels different on the surface. I glance across the room, where David is still asleep on the couch. The soft glow from the lamp casts gentle shadows on his face, highlighting the peacefulness in his expression. My heart aches at the sight. I love him, I do. But there's this undeniable pull towards Eric that I can't shake off. It feels like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap at any moment. I take a deep breath, tapping out a response. Yes, I'd like that. When? The anticipation hangs in the air. I know I shouldn't be doing this, but the thrill of it all is intoxicating. The screen flashes with his reply almost immediately. "I'll come over in an hour." My stomach flips, and I can't help but smile. As I wait, I replay the events of the past few days in my mind. The stolen glances, the lingering touches, the way my heart skipped a beat when Eric and I shared that kiss. It felt like the world around us faded away, leaving just the two of us, caught in a moment that felt both right and wrong. I remember how he pulled me closer, whispering things that sent shivers down my spine. "I've wanted this for so long," he had said, and I felt the truth of his words deep in my bones. The hour drags on, each minute stretching into eternity. I try to focus on the television, but the images blur as my thoughts drift back to Eric. I can still feel the warmth of his body against mine, the way his lips moved with a certain urgency. I shake my head, trying to dispel the memory, but it clings to me like a shadow. When the doorbell rings, it feels like my heart has jumped into my throat. I take a moment to compose myself, smoothing my hair and adjusting my shirt before opening the door. There he is, standing on my doorstep, looking just as handsome as I remember. His dark hair falls slightly over his forehead, and his eyes hold a mix of mischief and seriousness. "Hey," he says, stepping inside. The moment the door closes behind him, the air feels charged, electric. "Hi," I reply, my voice barely above a whisper. We move to the living room, and I can feel the tension in the air. It's palpable, almost suffocating. Eric sits down on the edge of the couch, and I can't help but notice how close he is to me. The space between us feels like a chasm, yet I want to bridge it. "I've been thinking about everything," he starts, running a hand through his hair. "About us." My heart races as I look into his eyes. "Me too," I admit. I can't stop thinking about that night. A small smile plays on his lips. It was intense. Intense is one way to put it, I say, laughing nervously. I just keep wondering if we crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. Eric leans closer, his voice low and tempting. But what if that line was meant to be crossed? What if we're meant to explore this? His words send a thrill down my spine. I want to argue, to remind him of David, but the way he's looking at me makes it hard to think straight. "What about David?" I ask, my voice trembling. "David isn't here," Eric points out. "And honestly, I can't stop thinking about you, about us." I swallow hard, the conflict raging inside me. I know I should stand firm, but the pull towards Eric is overwhelming. "What do you want from me?" He reaches out, his fingers brushing against my arm, and it feels like fire. "I want to be with you, I want to take this further. The words hang in the air, heavy and intoxicating. I can feel myself wavering, caught between desire and loyalty. I don't know if I can, I say, my voice barely above a whisper. Just think about it, he urges, his eyes locked onto mine, searching for some sign of agreement. We can take it slow. Just let me in. I nod, though uncertainty swirls in my mind. As we sit there, the tension thickens, and I know that whatever happens next will change everything. Later, as Eric leaves, I can't shake the feeling that I'm teetering on the edge of something dark and exhilarating. I close the door behind him, leaning against it as I try to catch my breath. The adrenaline of our encounter lingers, but so does the gnawing guilt. David shifts in his sleep, and my heart clenches. What have I done? As I retreat to my room, the weight of my choices settles heavily on my chest. I can feel the game we've begun playing, the dangerous dance of secrecy and desire. Eric's messages fill my phone, each one a reminder of the thrill and the risk. I can't help but respond, the excitement bubbling within me, but I know I'm walking a tightrope, one slip away from everything coming crashing down. And as I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, I wonder how long I can keep this up before someone gets hurt. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, heart racing as I stare at my phone. The screen lights up with a message from Eric, my neighbor. What do you think about a weekend getaway? The question sends a thrill through me, igniting a mix of excitement and dread. I know I shouldn't be entertaining this. David is asleep just down the hall, completely unaware of the storm brewing within me. I bite my lip, considering my response. The idea of escaping for a weekend feels intoxicating. It's a chance to break free from the weight of my responsibilities, from the life I've built with David. But I can't shake off the guilt that wraps around me like a heavy blanket. What would I even say to David? I quickly type back, "Sounds tempting. Let me think about it." My fingers hover over the screen, the words feeling both thrilling and terrifying. Moments later, Eric replies, "Just think about it. I know a great place." The thought of being alone with him, away from prying eyes, sends a shiver down my spine. I remember the way he looked at me the last time we were together, the intensity of his gaze that made me forget everything else. As I pace around the room, I try to rationalize the situation. I tell myself it's just a weekend. I could say I'm visiting a friend or attending a work seminar. David would buy it, wouldn't he? He's always trusted me. Or maybe it's just a matter of time before he starts to sense something's off. The excitement mingles with fear, and I can't help but feel alive at the thought of lying to David. What does that say about me? I shake my head, pushing away the doubt. I'm not a bad person. I'm just lost in something I didn't expect. Eric's presence has stirred something within me that I thought was long gone. I take a deep breath and decide to go for it. I text Eric. "Okay, I'm in. Just let me figure out how to make it work." His response is almost immediate. "Perfect. I'll handle the details. Just be ready for some fun." The word fun sends a thrill down my spine. I spend the next hour crafting a story for David. It has to sound believable. I can't let him see how excited I am about this. I'm going to visit Sarah for the weekend, I finally tell him at dinner. She needs help with her new place. David nods, engrossed in his phone, and I feel a pang of guilt. I can't help but think about how much he loves me, how devoted he is, and here I am, plotting a betrayal. As the evening wears on, I can't shake the feeling of exhilaration mixed with dread. I keep imagining the weekend with Eric, the freedom, the passion. It's a dangerous game we're playing, but it feels so right. The thought of being with him, away from everything, is intoxicating. After David heads to bed, I slip into my own room, my heart racing. I I can't believe I've agreed to this. I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Eric's smile, the way he makes me feel alive. The anticipation is overwhelming, and it's all wrapped in a thick layer of guilt. I close my eyes, letting the dreams of what's to come wash over me, even as a small voice in my head whispers that I should stop before it's too late. But I can't. I'm already in too deep. I arrived at the hotel with a flutter of nerves in my stomach. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me. Eric stood next to me, his presence both comforting and electrifying. We exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that we were about to cross a line we could never uncross. "This place looks amazing," I said, trying to mask my anxiety. I could see the excitement in Eric's eyes as he glanced around the room, but I could also sense the tension between us, like a taut string ready to snap. "Just wait until you see the view from the balcony," he replied, his voice low and inviting. There was a hint of mischief in his tone that made my heart race. I knew what he meant, and I felt a thrill course through me, pushing aside the guilt that lingered. As Eric opened the door to our room, I stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the luxurious atmosphere. The soft lighting created an intimate space, and I could hardly believe I was here, about to spend the weekend with him, away from the responsibilities that weighed heavily on my shoulders. "This is unreal," I murmured, taking a moment to absorb it all. Eric leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his gaze piercing through me. I felt exposed under his scrutiny, but there was a part of me that craved this vulnerability. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "I think so," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The truth was, I was terrified, but the thrill of the unknown was intoxicating. He stepped forward, closing the distance between us. As he reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear, it felt like a spark ignited within me. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice husky. I could feel my cheeks flush under the weight of his words, and for a moment, I forgot everything else. David, my life, the consequences. "Eric," I started, but he silenced me with a look, his eyes dark with desire. I knew I should stop him, that I should remind him of our reality, but the heat of the moment pulled me in. Suddenly he pulled me closer, and I could feel his breath against my skin. "Just for this weekend, let's forget everything else," he urged, his voice a seductive promise. I nodded, the thrill of his invitation making my heart pound even harder. With that, he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, as if we were both testing the waters. But as our lips moved together, the kiss deepened, igniting a fire between us that had been smoldering for far too long. I lost myself in the moment, surrendering to the passion that consumed me. We stumbled to the bed, laughter bubbling between kisses, and I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Each touch, each kiss was electrifying. The world outside faded away, and it was just the two of us, tangled in sheets and desire. "God, I've wanted this for so long," Eric breathed, his fingers tracing my jawline. I felt a rush of excitement at his confession, the thrill of being desired so fiercely. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hold you like this. I can't believe we're actually doing this," I whispered, my heart racing as I pressed my body closer to his. The thrill of the forbidden made every moment feel heightened, every touch more meaningful. He chuckled softly, brushing his lips against my forehead. "There's no going back now," he said, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. I knew he was right. This was a point of no return, a reckless dance on the edge of everything I had known. As the hours passed, I surrendered completely to the passion that enveloped us. Our bodies moved in perfect harmony, the pleasure overwhelming as we explored each other with a fervor that felt both new and familiar. the sheets tangled around us as we lost ourselves in the moment, the world outside fading into oblivion. But in the quiet moments, when I lay against him, I couldn't shake the thought of David. His face, the memories of our life together, flashed through my mind. I felt a pang of guilt, a reminder of the love I had for him, but it was overshadowed by the exhilaration of what I was experiencing with Eric. "Are you okay?" Eric asked, brushing a thumb across my cheek. His voice was filled with concern, and I could see the genuine care in his eyes. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just overwhelmed, I guess," I replied, trying to convince myself as much as him. The truth was, I was torn. The thrill of being with Eric felt intoxicating, yet the weight of my choices threatened to drown me. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the room, I realized that this weekend would change everything. I was wrapped in the arms of a man who ignited a fire within me that I had thought long extinguished. But the reality of my life loomed large, a constant reminder that I was playing a dangerous game. "Let's make the most of this," Eric said, pulling me closer. I knew I should resist, that I should think of David and the life we had built together. But in that moment, all I could think about was the intoxicating freedom I felt in Eric's embrace. And so, I surrendered once more, choosing to live in the moment, despite the storm that awaited me when I returned home. I'm standing in the dim light of my living room, my heart racing as I close the door behind me. The echoes of laughter and whispered secrets from our weekend away with Eric still linger in my mind. I can't shake the thrill of what we shared, the moments that felt like pure magic. Yet, as I glance around my home, the reality of what I've done settles in, heavy and suffocating. David is still asleep on the sofa, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I take a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I should feel at ease in my own home, but the guilt is a constant companion, gnawing at me. I can see his peaceful expression, and it makes my heart ache. How can I reconcile the love I have for him with the wild passion I've experienced with Eric? The memory of Eric's touch sends shivers down my spine. His fingers brushing against my arm felt electric, igniting something deep inside me that I didn't know was there. Just one drink, I had told myself. But it wasn't just a drink. It was the beginning of a whirlwind that swept me off my feet. Why did I let it go this far? I whisper to myself, glancing at David again. He stirs slightly, but doesn't wake. I want to reach out and shake him, to make him see how precarious everything has become, how fragile our lives are now. As I walk to the kitchen, every step feels heavy with the weight of my choices. The memories flood back. The secret smiles exchanged with Eric. The way his laughter filled the air as we reminisced about old times. I can still hear his voice, low and inviting, pulling me into a world where everything felt right, even as I knew it was so wrong. "Let's just forget everything for a moment," he had said, his gaze intense and unwavering. I remember the way my heart raced at those words, the way his lips curled into a smile that promised adventure. Just you and me. Those words had been a siren call, pulling me in. I had known the risks, yet I couldn't resist. I had followed him, willingly, into the depths of a passion that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Now, standing in the kitchen, I pour myself a glass of water, trying to wash away the remnants of the weekend. But each sip feels like a reminder of the sweetness I've tasted with Eric. The thrill of our stolen moments together, the way he held me close, as if I were the only thing that mattered in the world. "Are you okay?" David's voice breaks through my thoughts, and I jump slightly, nearly spilling my water. I turn to him, forcing a smile even as my heart sinks. "Yeah, just a little thirsty," I reply, my voice sounding far too casual. I can't let him know. I can't let him see the turmoil inside me. "How was your nap?" Good, he says, stretching and yawning. I missed you. I thought you'd be back sooner. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I got caught up with some things, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. You know how it is. He nods, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I take a moment to collect myself, to push down the guilt that threatens to overwhelm me. It's just a moment, I tell myself. Just a little longer, and everything will be fine. But the thrill of my weekend with Eric is still fresh in my mind. The way he'd looked at me, the way his lips had felt against my skin. I can't help but recall the heat of his body pressed against mine, the way I melted into him, forgetting everything and everyone else. Did you have fun? David asks, his eyes searching mine for something, though I can't tell what. Of course, I reply, forcing a grin. Just the usual errands and stuff. I can't believe the lies that spill from my lips so easily. Good. I was thinking we could do something together later. Just you and me, he says, a hopeful smile on his face. The sincerity in his voice stabs at my heart. That sounds nice, I manage to say, even as my mind races to the thought of Eric. How can I plan a future with David when my heart is split in two? Let's order in then and watch that movie you wanted to see, he suggests, oblivious to the war raging inside me. Sure, that sounds great, I reply, my voice almost a whisper. As I stand there, I feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me. The thrill of what I've done with Eric clashes violently with my love for David. I know that if the truth comes out, everything will shatter. But for now, in this moment, I choose to hold on to the thrill, to the excitement of what I've experienced, even knowing the cost it may bring. I glance at David, his warm smile a reminder of the life we've built together. And yet, in the depths of my soul, I know I've crossed a line, and there's no going back.